The type of base construction chosen will have a significant effect on how complex the management of heat, air, and moisture movement is. If we begin by considering a typical timber frame structure, we can see that this build-up requires the mitigation of a number of issues. Firstly, in a traditional open panel timber frame, the insulation is fitted on site between structural timbers, and likewise either in the loft space or, as shown here, between roof rafters. In this type of construction, excessive air movement can arise because the insulation used is not convection tight, and because the air barrier layer is not continuous and well sealed. There is also a high degree of thermal bridging present in this type of construction, where the timber structure passes through the insulation layer. Fibrous insulation, like mineral wool, is not convection tight, and rigid foam boards, whilst airtight themselves, are often fitted with gaps around the edges which can allow air movement. To mitigate these issues, the accepted practice is to use an air and vapour control layer internally. These membranes, such as our Project range, are impermeable to both air and vapour movement, and if installed correctly will enable these structures to meet even very low air leakage rates. Sealing this type of membrane properly is where problems can arise with this type of construction. On paper, this is a simple task, but on site it can be challenging. Laps must be positioned over a solid substrate to permit the application of pressure, the correct tape must be used and correctly applied, and all penetrations for surfaces must be properly sealed. This applies not just during initial construction, but to all subsequent works as well. Junctions with external and internal wall and roof elements also need to be sealed around, and any fixing for joints and rafters should also be airtight. With good installer training and design features such as service voids, this is certainly not insurmountable, but there are other possibilities that will design out a lot of these issues altogether. This type of construction is cross-laminated timber, or CLT, in which alternating layers of timber are used to create large structural panels. These panels are then bolted or screwed together to form the basic structure of the building. Because the structure is a solid panel, there are no voids in which to place insulation. This means another approach is required. The simplest solution here is to position the insulation externally, wrapping the entire timber structure. This means there are virtually no thermal bridges other than fixings used for the insulation and outer cladding. This in turn means that other options are available for air leakage reduction, and this is where the Wraptite membrane is particularly useful. If we apply Wraptite externally over the face of the CLT panels, it will provide a degree of temporary weather protection during the transportation of the panels, or if applied on site to the building as a whole until the outer cladding is in place. This can allow work to progress internally as the space is mostly wind and watertight as soon as the membrane is applied, so temporary heating will be more effective and materials can be stored safely prior to installation. Installing the air barrier in this position means there are a lot fewer complex seals and junctions required to work around internal walls, floors and other structural elements. This makes ensuring the membrane is well fitted with good seals at all joints requires a lot less time and effort than if done internally. Internally, services can also be run wherever is required without risking damage to the air barrier. Internal walls can be fixed into place and cabling, pipework and ventilation systems can be positioned in their most optimum location. These services also don't need to be sealed as often, and specialised airtight hardware such as downlighter hoods are not required. This has the effect of reducing time for installation and does not require any additional skills or patience on the part of the installers. As Wraptite is also permeable to water vapour, it can be positioned at any point in the structure without the risk of trapping moisture and increasing condensation risks. In fact, depending on the specifics of the construction, a dedicated vapour control layer may not be required at all. Combined with the insulation layers externally, this means the entire structure is wrapped in an airtight and insulating layer with the minimum number of penetrations possible. If necessary, an additional vapour permeable membrane can be positioned over the insulation to provide both additional secondary weather protection and to prevent wind washing through the insulation layers where fibrous insulation is used. Some membranes used in this position, such as our fire shield shown here, can also help provide resistance to external fire spread. Although it shares a Euroclass B rating with many other membranes, Fire Shields has an intumescent coating which provides an additional level of protection against ignition and fire spread. A build-up like this with the base of cross-laminated timber or structural insulated panels, Wraptite over the panel surface, a thick layer of unbridged insulation and a secondary airtight membrane externally provides a very dependable barrier to unplanned air movement. This in turn ensures the building system's ventilation can function as designed, delivering the fresh air crucial to maintain a healthy environment.